Okay, so this next part's not in the textbook at all, but this is what I wrote up for you guys because I want you to understand how miserable buying a car is, how much they're going to try to screw you over in all honesty, and what is it really like when you go to buy a car. And if we were in class, I'd ask for people who've had personal experience, and I guarantee you each of them would say, yes, they've dealt with it, yes, it is annoying, and you do have to be very, very careful. So what I wanted to do was educate you, what's the real version of buying a car? So what I asked you to do is kind of follow along this, read this. It's just kind of me giving you some personal advice of what should it be like when you go to buy a car. So let's look at the first thing. The first thing you need to realize is that you're not just buying the car, you also have to pay tax. And that could be a significant amount. For instance, the sales tax in Glendale, Arizona, if we're looking up Glendale, which is where our school is currently at 9.2%. That's almost 10%. So that means if you buy a $10,000 car, you're going to be paying almost $1,000 in tax alone. So you need to realize tax rates mean everything. I want you to look up the tax rate where you live or where you would think you could buy a car. So I'm going to put 9.2% because that's our tax rates. Look it up. The next thing you want to do is you want to look up what your credit score is. To look up your credit score, there's many different ways you can do it. If you have credit cards or banks, a lot of them have a way for you to check your credit score. I like using an app just to keep an eye on it called Credit Karma. It's a free app, secure app. It gives you your TransUnion and your Equifax score. Most banks are going to give you your FICO score. There's different types of institutions that monitor your credit and give you different scores. Credit Karma doesn't give you too accurate, but it does give you an idea of what's going on. Do you have good credit, bad credit? Also gives you some nice ideas of how could you get better credit, what's hurting you and what's helping you. Okay? So why do you care about credit scores? Well, I want you to, once you find your credit score, to Google what would you get for a car loan interest rate with your given credit score. So for instance, let's pretend my credit score is a 650. It's not, but let's pretend my credit score is a 650. I would say estimated car loan APR with 650 credit score. I just type that into a Google search or whatever browser you want to use to search it and see what interest rates you would get. What you're going to notice very quickly is the better your credit score is, the lower interest rate you get. If you have a great credit score, they consider you low risk, so they give you lower interest rates. If you have a bad credit score, below 650, certainly below 600 would be bad, very bad credit, then what they consider you as high risk and they give you horrible credit rates. You're talking about options of getting 0% loans all the way up to having to pay something like 15% to get a car loan. So make sure you know what your credit score is. You want a higher credit score. That's why I was telling you earlier, make sure you get a credit card, okay? So what I want you to do is I want you to determine the APR interest that you would get for a 60-month loan. That's for 5 years. So given your credit score, what would be your, and you don't need to write down your credit score, I don't care what it is, what would be your interest rate for 5 years? I'm going to make one up here. I'm going to say I could get one at something like 7.2%. I'm just totally making up a number here. I want you to Google it. I just want you to see later what that is for, okay? It says, now let's find a car that you want. I don't want you to look up, I don't care. You can have as much fun with this as you want. So for instance, maybe you want a new Tesla. Those things cost about $100,000. I would think you'd be crazy for wanting one, but hey, if you want a Tesla, you can look up a Tesla. That's perfectly fine. But I want you to look up the price of any car it is. I'm just going to make up a price. Let's say a car that I want, for instance, maybe I want a used Tahoe or Suburban. Those things would cost me about $35,000 for a newer but still used Tahoe or Suburban. So that's what I want to buy. You pick what you want to buy. Look it up on the internet, any one of the sites. See how much your car is, your dream car is, or just a car that you think you might want is. Write down the purchase price of it right there. Okay? So the next thing I want you to do is determine how much money do you have for a down payment. How much money could you put for a down payment? Well, you might have money that you've saved aside, that you have in a savings account. You could use that as a down payment. But what most people do is they actually trade in or sell their current car and then use any proceeds that they have from their current car as their down payment. So one website that I like to use is called Kelley Blue Book. I go to kelleybluebook.com. I give them my car, and it will tell me what my trade-in value is and what my selling value is individually. This is very important because what you'll find out is if you trade in a car Let's say they're going to offer you $4,000 for that car as a trade-in. You might be able to get $6,000 by selling that car yourself. You get significantly more money if you sell the car by yourself than if you actually trade that car in. Okay? So what you want to do is you want to think, do I actually owe money on that car? So let's say they're going to give me $4,000 on my car, I'm trading it in, and I still owe $3,000. That means I would get back a check for $1,000, or I'd have $1,000 for my down payment. The difference between what I owe and what I make. If I didn't owe any money on that car and they gave me $4,000, that would give me $4,000 towards my down payment. So determine the value of your car, which you could use Kelley Blue Book for. Determine what you would get for your car and what your down payment could be. Let's say I have a total of, I'm just going to make up a number here, I'm going to say $2,000 as my down payment, right? So that's going to start giving me the idea of how can I find my loan amount A. Remember, your loan amount A, you have to have the purchase price of the car, you have to know what your sales tax is, you have to know what your down payment is, you have to know what your licensing fees are. You put all those things together, subtract off that down payment, and that's going to give you your A amount, which is the loan amount that you need. So that's what we were gathering the information for. I want you to notice, though, that it's not as straightforward as that when you go to buy a car. They're not just going to say, here's your sales tax, here's your licensing fee, and then here's your down payment, what's your loan amount. They're going to try to stick it to you any way they can and get you to buy a whole bunch of things that you don't need, okay? So first thing, they're allowed to do, their first thing is they're legally required to disclose all of these amounts. One fee that you're going to see on there is probably called a doc fee. It's the dealership fee. They're going to try to sneak this in here and say, okay, you're going to pay a $500 doc fee. That's $500 just for us selling you this car. This is where the salespeople make their money. So almost every single dealership is going to have a doc fee. Try to get that doc fee as low as you can, or even eliminate it if possible. Okay, you need to be really, really, really careful. I'm telling you, I went to go buy my car a couple years ago, and when I went to go buy my car, I saw that there was a $2,500 fee that they were added. I asked them what the heck that was for. They said, oh, well, that's our standard package. I said, well, I don't want your standard package. I don't want anything. Get that $2,500 off there. They said, oh, it's already stuff we've done to the car, like we put nitrogen in the tires. I'm like, I don't want shit in my tires. Get rid of that. I don't want any of these extra fees. Had to call the manager over, and the manager went and took off that $2,500. Had I not looked line by line, they would have added $2,500 fee to the price of my car. Absolutely ridiculous. Another thing that they did is tried to sell me gap insurance. Gap insurance is completely ridiculous unless you buy a new vehicle. You've got to be really careful with gap insurance. So let's say you buy a brand new $40,000 vehicle. If you buy a brand new $40,000 vehicle and you drive it off let's say that's how much you loan for the car. You drive that car off the curb. The second you go off the curb, that car's probably worth about $35,000 because it's now considered used, not a new car, because that's used car. So let's say you drive it off the curb and you get in a wreck. If you get in a wreck, even if it's not your fault, the insurance company is only going to replace the value of that car. The value of that car, because it's used, is the $35,000. So you drive off the curb, you get in a wreck, your car's totaled, the insurance company is going to give you $35,000, the value of the car. What's the problem with that? Your loan is for $40,000. So what happens is you owe $5,000 back to that company. You don't have a car, and you still owe $5,000. Gap insurance would cover that $5,000 right there. That's gap insurance. But let's look at it. What if you had a used car? If you had a used car and your loan was, let's say, $20,000 for that used car, when you drive it off of the lot, it's still worth dang near $20,000. It doesn't drop that much money at all. If not, I mean, even something worse. Let's say it's not your $20,000 loan. For instance, what if you put $10,000 down on a car? So it was a $30,000 car, and you put a loan of $20,000 car. When you drive it off the lot, it's still worth probably $28,000. That's what it's worth when you drive it off the lot, okay? So you get in a wreck, insurance is going to give you the value of the car, which is $28,000. You only owe $20,000. There is no gap. You don't owe anything extra, so gap insurance costs absolutely nothing. This is the case that happened to me. My car cost about $25,000. I put a significant down payment down, and they were still trying to sell me gap insurance. My gap didn't exist. The value of my car was worth more than the loan on my car. There was no gap. So they would have sold me $1,000 to $2,000 in insurance that covered absolutely nothing. Money in their pockets and out of mine. So be very, very careful. Only get gap insurance if your loan is worth more than the value of your car. Never, ever, ever get gap insurance if the loan is worth less than the value of your car. If the loan is less than the value of your car.